What's going on, Internet? I wanted to make a video of my latest project. I made a homemade Jon Boat out of 3/8 plywood. Just basically shit you could get at Home Depot. Cost about $60 to buy the wood, and you don't need very many tools to put it together. I used a skill saw, a jigsaw, a cordless drill, and a screw gun, an impact gun. And I made it in my garage. It took about 16 hours to do, start to finish, and maybe an hour for paint. So I just wanted to show you how, or not necessarily how I did it, but what went into building it, since I posted this on a couple internet forums and had a bunch of questions. So we'll start with the profile of the boat. It's essentially a flat bottom boat, so if we start at the back by the transom and work our way forward, you could see that the front part of the boat curves up. So it's 12 inches deep in the rear. It's 8 feet long, so from the rear forward, 8 feet, and at the 5-foot mark, I start to transition up all the way out to 6 inches at the very front. I don't even know what the fuck they call front of a boat. So I've got 3 foot of curve in the front of the boat, and it's just an eyeball curve. I laid out 3 1-foot lines and incrementally laid out a curve, which I drew by hand, and then I stacked my 2 gun walls on top of each other, clamped them together, and cut it with a jigsaw to get my profile. Then I glued the hull to the gun walls. So I don't know if you could tell from that, but you can kind of see the curve there. I glued those 2 together, and basically once I have just the 2 sides glued to the hull, I let that sit overnight. Let that glue dry. That's probably a better picture. So that looks down the boat. The lighting's terrible back here. So once I had that shape, I glued in my transom, and the transom I made out of a 1x12. So I glued that in and then capped the top. And it's important that this is very solid front and back. It makes the boat really rigid. So once I got the transom on the back and the cap on the front, I started framing in the inside. So you can see there on the inside, I took a 1x2 and formed the profile all the way down and glued it from front to back. And in the back there, I took a 2x3 and I put that across the back, so it gives me a nice solid spot to glue the hole to the transom. And then periodically inside the boat, I put 1x2s across, and they're glued down. All the glued seams are glued with Type Bond 2, since it's a waterproof glue. So as you can see on the inside, I've got a runner going the full length from the very front to the back, all the way through, both sides. And then periodically, to stiffen up the hull, I put 1x2s crossing it on the inside. So after I had the framed in the inside, and I put my bench on the back to stiffen it up, I did the same thing with the front. That's a 2x3 going across there, and this is just another piece of the plywood that I had left over out of my 2 sheets of plywood. And then I also put a seat in the middle, and those have dual purposes. They act as the seats, and then they also act as gussets to keep the boat from racking. Keeps it very, very stiff and sturdy. So then I took a couple of more 1x3s and I made essentially what's just a bumper. In the front I have 2. I'll get on the side here. So you can see the front there, I have two 1x3s to act as a bumper. And then going down the side, I also have another one running the full length. So if you bang into something, the theory is that it'll damage this piece as opposed to the plywood hull. I'm making this shit up as I go along. I didn't have any blueprints or anything. I just looked at some pictures of some boats and built some shit I wanted to build. So both sides 1x3s. And then on the bottom, since this is going to be a shallow draft Jon Boat, I've got, I don't know if you'll be able to see them, but 1x3 runners that are glued and screwed into the bottom of the boat. Two on the outsides and then one in the middle. So you can see that that runs the full length of the boat from, I guess, bow to stern, I think is how they would say it. And that, if I was to get into some really shallow water, rocky water or whatever, it's there to try and absorb some of that impact of bringing it on shore. And it also acts, the runners act like a flighting, if you will, to help keep the boat going straight when you're paddling. So I bought a can of mismatched paint that somebody had purchased, and it wasn't the right color, exterior enamel, and I painted the inside with it, and that was $5. And then I coated the outside, the hull and the gun walls, with this Henry's asphalt emulsion sealer and damp proofer. And once it dries, it's about as watertight as I can get without fiberglassing, which is a whole hell of a lot of work. It would have taken me more time to fiberglass and sand the outside of this boat than it did to make the entire boat to begin with, and it's not cheap. So a 1 gallon can of this will give you 2 or 3 coats on a small boat. This boat is not very big. It's 3 feet wide and 95 inches long. So the 2 sheets of plywood were $15 a piece. These 1x2s are 84 cents a piece. I bought 3 of the 2x3 studs. They were $2 a piece, I think. The can of paint was $5, and this emulsion asphalt roofing sealer or foundation sealer, whatever you want to call it, was $16. So all told, oh, and then also I bought a 6-foot 1x12. It was, I don't know, $6. All told, it was $80 to construct the entire boat. Some of the stuff I had laying around, silicone screws, I already had that, so that's factoring everything. If I had to buy everything to start over, it'd be $80, and you don't need any fancy power tools to build it. So I'm going to have to get it registered to run this motor, but I thought to myself that perhaps I will or I won't want to mount a little trolling motor, transom mount. And I put this tab, if you will, sticking up through the transom to mount this trolling motor. And the only problem with it now is it's a little bit thin. I'm at the maximum of what the screws will handle, so I'm going to double that up. I'm actually going to sister another piece to the back and glue it on there nice and solid, and then add a little gusset here so there's no deflection. That wiggles a little bit. And I'm hoping this Minn Kota 30-pound truss will get me going 4 or 5 miles an hour, because it sure beats paddling. So without the motor, if it's just me, an ice chest, my tackle box, and my fishing gear, you know, all of that stuff, it's about 250 pounds, and the boat will only sink about 2 inches into the water. Hence the term shallow draft. With the motor, we're going to sink a little bit more. The battery and trolling motor add another 120 pounds. You can get that Minn Kota 30-pound thrust trolling motor for $100 at Walmart, probably similar on Amazon. I got mine at Bass Pro, it was $115. I had a gift certificate, so it cost me $15. The battery I got at Walmart, it's an Everstart Marine, what does that say there? Marine cranking amps, 844, 122 ampere hours. It was $86. And then you also need to put, I haven't mounted it yet, a 50 amp circuit in line, so that if something goes goofy with your battery, it doesn't destroy your trolling motor. So, the only other thing I wanted to talk about was if you're paddling, you need to be sitting in the middle seat. When you sit on the back, the front of the boat lifts out of the water slightly. The runners become less effective, and as you're paddling, the torque you apply tends to turn the boat from the back, as opposed to driving you forward. But if you sit in the middle, the boat sits flat. You don't have this problem, and as you paddle, your tendency to turn is much less likely. It drives you forward much better. But with the motor, it's not gonna matter. But from time to time, if I was just floating down the river on this, I would just rock the paddles. I wouldn't even use the motor. And I built this basically because I actually have a 14-foot bass boat. Me and a buddy bought it together, and I keep it at his house. I live in Modesto. He lives in Escalon, so it's kind of inconvenient to go get it when I just want to go to a little local creek or a lake near me. I could just throw this in the bed of my truck. It only weighs 75 pounds, so I can carry it down to the water and paddle around or scoot around with that little motor, without all the hassle of driving to his house to get my boat. And for the price, you could build it for next to nothing. The battery, motor, and all that stuff costs 3 times as much as it did to construct the boat. So hopefully this answers some of the questions posted on the forums, and I'll check back on my page from time to time, and if anybody's got any questions, I'll try and answer it. But it is very easy to build your own DIY boat. It doesn't require much in the way of tools. You could probably get away with just a skill saw and a drill. You can butcher some radius cuts with a skill saw. It's not too terribly difficult. And hopefully this Sunday, if I'm not working, I'm going to try and make a companion video of me actually floating it, driving it around the lake. So thanks for checking out my video. Late.